It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Oh, welcome back. You are still live with Expresso. Thank you so much for joining us for what has been an amazing show with some real gravitas, and we're going to continue with what I think has to be probably the most important conversation in South Africa at the moment. And we are obviously looking at the stats relating to femicide and gender-based violence in South Africa, some of the worst in the world, unfortunately. And we recognize that these are often, they take place in the context of intimate partner violence, which is what makes it so insidious and so difficult to pull yourself out of that cycle. And joining us via video call to shed more light on the trauma that is developed through this intimate partner violence is social worker and program manager at the MOSAIC Training Service and Healing Center, Nandipha Ganya. Nandipha, very good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
What forms of violence happens in intimate partner relationships, Nandipha?
Intimate partner violence takes on many forms, but the most prevalent ones are violence as well as sexual violence. But there's also physical abuse, economic abuse, and as Graham correctly mentioned, which has been much publicized recently, there's also femicide as well. So it takes on many forms.
You know, it's a very difficult, it seems like this is happening on levels, that the country itself is caught in a cycle, but you have to feel that so many women are repeatedly being victimized because they themselves are caught in some sort of a cycle. And the damage of being in that space must be immense. What is the trauma that comes out of this kind of, this very close contact, this kind of violence and abuse that happens in a relationship, in the most intimate of relationships? What's the trauma that results?
So because this kind of violence takes place in an intimate relationship, in a space where one hopes to feel safe, where one hopes to feel loved, and the person who's meant to be, you know, making you feel loved and making you feel safe is the one who's then violating you or hurt this way. Partner violence can then result in psychological trauma. Where the survivor experiences or can experience or develop anxiety, they can develop depression, they can also develop fear because they are constantly living in a state of fear and they have very little autonomy over their own lives. So their ability to also make decisions for themselves is also very limited because of the breakdown in who they are and in their self-esteem and in who and how they view themselves. So intimate partner violence can really be very damaging to a person's self-concept, but it can also manifest in physical you know, injuries or physical trauma. For instance, like broken bones, or organ damage. I mean, in the most severe cases, it can also lead to death or even disability as well.
Just as G touched on earlier on, it is a cycle, a form of cycle that, you know, many women find themselves stuck in, and they feel as though once it's happened to them, it's difficult to break out of it and live their own lives. So, Sis Nandi, I want to ask you, what kind of work needs to be done for women who have gone through this abusive cycle, you know, to get through the trauma?
Yeah, so interventions really need to focus on rebuilding the person. So taking them from a point of being a victim to a point of being a survivor, where they are then able to have a positive outlook on their life, but also to be able to live independently and to be able to live free of violence and to be in relationships that are healthy and they are able to then relate to others in a more positive way. Because if you remember, intimate partner violence and this kind of violence that especially takes place over an extended period of time really breaks down the person and it makes them feel very worthless, and they've been told repeatedly that you know, you don't deserve to be loved, you are worthless, no one will miss you, no one cares about you. So that kind of programming is very damaging to the survivor. So interventions need to focus on that kind of psychosocial support in the form of counseling and other programs, but it also needs to focus on prevention as well. So your counseling would be your response to the intimate partner, but then your prevention to it is equally important, because we need to be educating communities on what intimate partner violence is, what gender-based violence is, and what is driving gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. Because survivors live in communities, perpetrators live in communities. So it's important that our interventions are then stemming from the communities as well. And that's how we will be able to fight intimate partner violence more effectively.
I mean, I wish we had all morning to talk about this. Just very quickly, what do you suggest we do if we see something happening, if we know that someone is in an abusive relationship? What should we do, and what should someone who is in that cycle do to get themselves out? Who can they go to, and what can they do?
The most important thing to remember is that help is available. There are organizations like MOSAIC. There are many other GBV organizations that are working with survivors throughout South Africa and internationally. If you know of someone who is in such a relationship, never underestimate the power of being there for someone and supporting them. Because if you've been told that you are not worth anything, that you're not deserving anything, it's very important to then know that there's someone who cares about you and who cares about your well-being. So that's very important. But also there are government resources available as well, like the National GBV Command Center, which is available 24/7 as well. And you can also accompany the survivor to the nearest police station as well. So there are many avenues to explore in order to break the cycle of violence and to assist survivors and ensure that they get the help that they need.
You are not completely powerless. Nandipha, thank you so much. As I said, probably the most important conversation we can be having in this country at the moment. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing, you and your organization, every day.
Thank you so much for having us.
Without life-saving organizations like MOSAIC, we would be helpless in the fight against gender-based violence. This Women's Month, find out how you can help your local abuse and shelter organizations today.
Yep, do it, and we'll have those details on our social media platforms continually. Thank you so much for joining us for that conversation.